Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast. Welcome back to the Ninja Selling Podcast. Matt and Garrett are back with you again. We appreciate you joining us. If you're looking for more of Ninja Selling as you listen to this and wondering where this comes from, go to ninjaselling.com. You can learn about it all there. If you want to learn about coaching, you can hear about there too. And Matt, good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Mr. Garrett. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing great. And we got a fun one today, talking a little bit about kind of, what's going on in the market and everything. I think we got some good stuff that we're going to be able to share with people today.
All right, man. Well, let's jump right into this episode. There's some things that have been coming up, and it's funny. I brought up this topic to Matt, and Matt was very clear of like, this feels a little redundant to kind of other things that we've talked about recently. And I think where I'm kind of going is I think we need to build off what we've talked about recently here, because I'm seeing new things kind of bubble up in the marketplace. And as these things are bubbling up in the marketplace, I am trying to kind of go, okay, what does this mean and what does it look like? And I'm the type of person that of all the tests I've ever taken, all the things when it says this is who you are as a person, I'm what they call a questioner, which has gotten me in a lot of trouble in my life. But it also makes me go search for why. Why is things happening? Why does it look that way? I don't take anything at face value. I want to know what's going on. And the thing that's been coming about is I've had agents over the last couple of months, Matt, that'll say things to me like, I've got this listing and it's kind of sitting here right now and it's not really moving and I don't know why it should be moving. And I've been trying to analyze, well, why is that happening? Is it that it's overpriced? Did they miss the market? What is going on here? In more and more conversations, I started to realize that there's some kind of tiers that are starting to happen. And I've been kind of noticing there's 3 tiers. There's this lower end price range that's moving pretty quick. There's a higher end price range, very high price range, that's moving very quick. And then there's this middle group that is kind of holding a little bit. It's in a weird pattern. And people have been using the word wonky and just not really gelling, not really coming together. They can't really put their finger on it about why it's doing what it's doing. So I started having people run numbers and really start to say, okay, give me your market that you're confused about right now. And we broke it out into price ranges and we kind of ran up through the price ranges. And it was really interesting that you could see it in the numbers. You could actually see this middle tier that the odds of selling was worse. The months of inventory was a lot higher. And I was going, oh my goodness, you can see this thing now. It's not just this conceptual idea of I feel like something's different. You can literally see it in real time, which then led to a lot of conversations, Matt, that we're going to talk about today, which is why? Why is this happening and what are we seeing? I don't know if we have all the answers for you today, but I think we're going to talk about is what are we seeing and what are our thoughts around this?
Yeah. And I think when you're doing these numbers too, it's also important to have your baseline of comparison.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What are you comparing to? Because I think you're going to see in some markets where, like Austin, as an example, all-time inventory kind of all around. But you also look at the history of that market and they didn't even experience a recession. I think there was down 0.1% in the house price index there in 2008. And it's just been woo ever since. And I think you're going to have in some markets where that middle market's going to be moving slower, but still moving fast relative to, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? And what's interesting though, is it seems pretty consistent where you have the middle market range where the finances become more of a factor in the decision-making process. I'm not saying finances aren't a big decision factor in the lower end or the higher end as well. It is, but life changes, needs, desires are driving those markets more than the finances because people either have the means or they're figuring it out, where in that middle market, it's we can kind of make this current house work. We don't need to take on a 7.5% mortgage right now. We don't need to pay those prices right now because the trend still generally is prices are still up across the board, right? And it looks like it's continuing to do that too, even in that middle market that's experiencing maybe, why isn't this listing selling in a week when it should be? So those are all the things that I think you have to like keep in mind. But when you see that and when you understand it a little bit better, you're able to make better decisions with your business and how you're conversing with your people, how you're setting up your listings for success. Because Garrett, what you said in the beginning is like, oh, are we priced too high? Are we positioned? Like, yes, to all of that probably. And now we know why, so we can make the right positioning decision to help these properties move if you're on the listing side.
Well, and Matt, as you started to talk about like, knowing what you're comparing this to, and this is not about comparing one market to another market to another market. This is about comparing actually one market month to month to month. Like if I was going to have anybody do these numbers, Matt, you would run your numbers for absorption and for absorption, months of inventory, and odds of selling. And you would basically run that 1 month, and then the next month, same darn search. And you're going to run the same thing. You're going to grab all that information another month. And if you can do this, you'll start seeing this trend where you can see this kind of break out. But yeah, you don't want to compare this to different markets. Everybody's got different things going on right now. You never want to compare, New York to Seattle to, and you would never want to compare even internal marketplaces of like looking at New York and saying, well, Manhattan should be running just the same as, Brooklyn. Well, not necessarily. Like they've got their own fingerprints and their own patterns that are starting to emerge. And you need to, if you really want to know, you better know. Like you got to know the data.
Well, and I think, one, there's great tools out there, as we always talk about. Like most MLSs and things have awesome tools where you can look at things historically. But I think understanding like where you play in the different neighborhoods, like even taking in New York as an example, like all those 5 boroughs, they'll function differently. But when it comes to how we position listings and how we're running searches for buyers, more and more I've seen this trend that kind of parallels this too. And this has really been amplified since COVID with more remote work and things like that, is location from a like, ooh, this is the desirable neighborhood versus this is changing a little bit. So when you're positioning a property, it used to be just positioning it in the neighborhood. Look at the neighborhood trends, see where we need to be, look at the absorption there, and you're probably going to position really well. The thing is though, buyers are looking in more than that neighborhood, depending on what is the primary driver of them moving to an area. Interesting story. I was talking to a client in Seattle this week, actually, and he was telling me, he's like, I realized this really interesting thing that happened this one time, because I was saying, is it neighborhood dependent, or are buyers buying based on commuting distance into the city, or North Seattle versus South Seattle? Because you could position a property against all the other things in North Seattle, but are buyers also looking at South Seattle? In which case, we need to position against all of that. And he said, well, an interesting thing happened. We had a listing on the north side, and there was multiple offers, and the second place person just missed it. Felt bad, but we sold it to the people in the first place. And then I took buyers to South Seattle, and there was a multiple offer down there, and it was a escalation clause that won his clients, and so they had to show the contract of the second place person, and it was the people who were second place on his listing too. And he was like, "Oh gosh, smoked him again." But for him, that showcased these buyers weren't like, oh, we have to be north or we have to be south of this. We need to be this distance from this area.
It wasn't a neighborhood specific thing. Interesting.
And I think those are things that you also have to bring into when you're doing this analysis of what's going on in these marketplaces, because you may also be positioning a property that's not only in this middle range where there could be this slowing of demand, but also where it seems like inventory is tight, but really it's a lot larger than you think, because the buyers are searching in a lot more areas that bring in more competition for that property.
Well, Matt, we started talking about this a while back when people were saying like, well, I've got these buyers, but we're not finding anything for them right now. There's no inventory. And we kept saying, expand the search, expand the search, expand the search. Like have a conversation with them about, well, what I know you want to be in North Seattle, but what are the other options around this right now that you might not even be paying attention to? And I've seen it happen a lot of times where all of a sudden an agent will say, well, I might send you something that's outside the parameters of this, that you've said this is the only thing that will work. And I don't want you to think I'm not listening to you. I'm just showing you ideas. And all of a sudden they show them a property, and I'm making up South Seattle now because these are very, very different marketplaces. But all of a sudden you pull a property from down there and you go like, well, here, just thought you might like this. It's the same commute time into your office, your new job that you got. Same scenario, but look at this neighborhood. And they might go, I didn't even realize there were homes like that down there. I didn't realize that that was even available to us. I didn't realize that we could get a house maybe down there for less than what we were thinking about spending up here. And I got more cash in my pocket and we still have, you never know what's going to happen. But as inventory is low as it's been, and as people get more and more desperate to go like, look, we need to find a house. Like we need to figure this out. This isn't just about waiting longer. This isn't about, I got all the time in the world. At some point, you want to just move forward and be done. And I think that's a prime example of people kind of expanding that search out. And all of a sudden, the marketplace there that you're going to be comparing is much larger than what you thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt.
What's interesting, Matt, what also got us down this line here was we started to look at the financial pressures that are on this middle group. This middle group is way more dependent on not only, getting a loan, but they're at the top place of getting a loan is where we're finding this tier. It's that place that it's like on that verge of, if I had the cash, I'd pay cash. The people that do have the cash are paying cash. They're like, I'm not messing around with the loan right now. We're just going to buy this thing for cash.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I've done the numbers, Matt, with areas that are like $5 to $10 million. And those areas, there's a lot of movement. Beverly Hills, by the way, is where I'm talking about. They actually have a really strong market in that price range, but it's all cash. This isn't loan dependent. People aren't financing up here. There's this place in there where you can see the price range where these people are applying for loans. They are getting financing on these properties. And this is where the bottleneck is happening and it's slowing down. And then again, the lower area is cranking along because again, they got to make something work. They got to get in there. Matt, you made a great point. We're getting ready is that middle tier, because of these financial stresses and where they're at, it's not necessarily a necessity. It's more of a want, which means that they've got to weigh out all these factors and go, is it worth it? Is it worth it to do this right now? Maybe we can wait a little bit. Maybe we have some time. Lower, no wait, upper end. Hey, if we want to do it, let's just do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, there's a broader economic impact that's going on here too. And I think we're definitely starting to see a lot of this happen right now as we're in May of 24. Last year, everybody was all about marry the house, date the rate. The economists were predicting rates to come down. And we talked about how much we hated that phrase.
I just saw that saying again. Somebody posted the other day. I was like, God, let it go.
Are they not paying attention to what's going on? Oh my gosh.
Let it go, please.
Like, I think we've all realized like, oh gosh, rates are not coming down. And by the way, we should never
they're supposed to be down right now. They're supposed to be down right now. Like every predictor that was said way back a year ago, like we should not be at the rate that we're at right now.
They're all like, oh, don't worry. By summer, we'll be back in the high fives, right? Is what a lot of people were saying. And we're looking at, mid sevens, right?
And just to continue to interrupt you, because I feel like I'm like dead on it today and I'm going to run with it. By the way, this was the same predictions that were failing all the time when rates were really low and everybody go, buy now, because rates are going to go up. Rates are going to go up. And everybody was buying and rates went down.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, rates are even, good. Lucky for you guys. Lucky for you. Because rates are going to go up soon. Like this is like the worst game. Like if you had to go place bets on this, do not listen to any of the predictors out there that are saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. It is the worst predictive market I've ever seen, ever, ever, ever. And I'm just amazed at how much we still rely on it. And we tell our clients and we lean into it to say, hey, guys, this is what the economists and what the professionals are saying out there. They are on this topic specifically wrong a lot. Like, be careful.
Yes. Well, because it relies so much on policy and decisions that are outside of consumer behavior control, right?
Yes.
Whereas price of homes is going to be dependent on supply and demand pretty much, which is why even with this confusion, people are like, why are prices still going up? Well, because in a comparative sense, inventory is still really low and demand is still really high, right? And so that's why we're seeing that trend. But here's the other interesting thing is the income level of where this like kind of move up buyer is, right? Like their incomes, across the board, incomes have not increased at the same pace of inflation. And people are starting to really see the impact of inflation right now when they're taking a deeper look at their grocery bill and all these things. And particularly those of you out there who are independent contractors, you real estate agents, right? I'm sure when you were doing your taxes last month, you were like, what? I didn't prepare as much savings as I thought I had because you were probably spending more than you typically do just doing your normal stuff.
Yep. Normal life.
And so you have that. So people are then carrying potentially, well, we saw the graphs. We're going to do a deeper episode on this coming up, is consumer debt is also crazy high.
It is a straight up graph almost right now. Like what I'm watching, if you had to look and say like, well, what's going to change in our world that's going to stop that from being a straight up line? I don't know. I don't see any like protective measures being put in place right now to slow that down at all. Like,
well, and that's all down to consumer habits, right? So you might see somebody like, hey, they make a good amount of money. They should be able to afford the house even with the interest rates. Like, well, we don't know what debt they're carrying. And, you know, when it comes to buying a house and getting loan approval, that income to debt ratio is going to show everything. And that's going to be the telltale sign of whether or not you're going to be able to do that move up or not. I mean, I think move up buyers are still sitting on a great amount of equity in their current home. So that still exists too, right? And so we're not saying that like this pocket is dead in any way. It's just, it's different.
No.
And these are the things that we want to know about. And then Garrett, we get to add on headlines and articles that are driving fear, all these different things. Like, what was this one from Yahoo Finance? My dad sent this to me, right? 80% of Americans think it's a bad time to buy a house. Gosh, doesn't that sound horrible, Garrett?
I love the way you said it, though. You're like, how many people, what's the percentage of people that are actually going to buy a house in the next year? What is it? What'd you say? 4%? Less than 4%?
Here's the interesting thing. Out of the number of households in the US compared to the number of households that trade every single year, only about 4% of people are in the US, maybe 5% are actually going to buy a house. So if 20% of people think now is a good time, because that's the actual survey comes from Fannie Mae's National Housing Survey, and their results were 20% of people think it's a good time to buy. That was the question. Now Yahoo took it and spun it the other way, saying, well, that means 80% must believe it's a bad time to buy, or they're just not buying a house right now, right?
Yeah.
So if you got 20% of the people thinking now's a good time, which by the way, is higher than the 15% of people in October of 23 who thought it was a good time to buy. So theoretically, we're up 33% in consumer sentiment in the housing market from the purchase perspective, just over the matter of about 9 months. That's incredible growth. Why wasn't the headline that? Home buying sentiment is up 33%. That could have been the headline. No, it was 80% think it's a bad time to buy, right? So you got to be aware of these things.
Got to make headlines, man. You got to make news. You got to make that news that stops and makes people go like, whoa, what's going on? And the other headlines don't do that. A lot of this conversation has come about, Matt, because I've been in coaching calls talking with people, and they'll say things like, I feel like people are overextended right now. I feel like this is what made me start doing research on this. I feel like people are spending more money than they're making right now. I feel like they've got themselves into high levels of debt and they're not sure how to get out of it. Last year, about this time, I was talking with a lender and they were talking about refinances happening. And they're like, man, we saw a spike in refinances. And I said, why would people be refinancing right now? Like, what is that about? You know, we're all of a sudden at a higher rate. And she said they're giving up their lower rates to be able to pull cash out to pay off debt. And I was like, well, that's not really what I want to hear right now. Like, that means we're living outside of
7.5% is a lot better than 35% on some credit cards, right?
So currently right now, I was talking with another friend of mine. She was talking about her friend who's in the banking industry, and they had a goal for personal loans that they were going to be writing that, I think it was over the year. It was actually over the month. It was 1.6 million is what their goal was that they had set. They had written like 3.5 million in personal loans at 14%.
Yeah.
Like, people are grabbing money right now. And this is where it got real for me. I went in and just Google search, and this is what I'm going to recommend you all do if you want to get your kind of sense on this. And we're going to then do a much deeper dive on this coming up on another episode. Just type in consumer credit card debt balances right now. I had the website that popped up for me was actually the Lending Tree. and they actually have graphs and a breakdown of like what's actually happening with consumer debt right now and what it looks like, that will wake you up. And that's what Matt and I were just kind of talking about here is the graph that's almost like a straight line up of credit card debt that people are sitting on. This is what's happening with that middle group. This is that middle group that they are the ones that qualify, by the way, for the credit cards. They are the ones that live a lot of their world in
They
fluctuating.
qualify for those personal loans too.
Yep. They are the ones that are making all that kind of happen. Upper side isn't doing it and the lower side isn't doing it. It's this middle group in here. And the lower side, Billy, they got their hands in it too. Just so we know. We're talking about homeowners on the lower end. They're there too.
Sure.
But this is where I think the most stress is happening is in the middle tier here. These are the ones that are pushing themselves maybe a little bit beyond their limits. And I think we're starting to see it start to show up. And this is what's causing this wonkiness or, kind of unclear marketplace in here. And this is just, I would be gathering information right now. And that's what I'm doing. Talk to your professionals, reach out to lenders, talk to them. I brought this up also about refinances. When people are getting refinances at 3% and they're pulling cash out and they're celebrating and they're reaching out to their friends and go, oh man, I just got the best loan. And everybody's high-fiving and they're going and buying a boat with the money that they pulled out because, man, look at this. Look what it means. This is great. That's in your face refinances. There's a silent refinance market that nobody gets to hear about. Nobody gets to see because nobody celebrates it. Nobody's running around high-fiving that they went from 3% to 8%. Even though that 8% loan is great because it's getting them out of a hole and it's paying
maybe they cleared off 6 figures worth of debt that was, they were paying thousands and thousands of dollars every month on, where now they just added a few $100 to their mortgage.
But you don't go talk about it. You don't go celebrate it. You don't go to your friends and be like, I was living outside my means for like 5 years, man. And look what I did.
I'm not a huge fan of debt. I've had some serious problems with debt in my past. But if somebody's making a move to better themselves, that should be celebrated, by the way. So if you're listening and that's you and people are doing that, high five, keep it on track, get yourself moving in that direction.
As long as you're making changes to your living situation.
Of course, you don't want to rack that credit card back up again.
Yeah, this isn't like I got it all paid off and now let's keep rocking and rolling like we have, like nothing's happened. This is a wake-up call, and you are very lucky. The ones that are able to pull the money out of their house and pay all that off and make it all work, oh my gosh, congratulations, because you are in a situation that you have a safety net that's allowing you to go, okay, that wasn't working. Now we're back at baseline. How can we readjust our lifestyle so we're not doing this? Because at some point, and this is what happened 2005, 2006, 2007, at some point, if something happens in the market and the equity is not there and it's not building in these homes, at some point you run out of that.
Yeah.
And when you run out of that, then all of a sudden you're left in a position of, maybe being foreclosed on, all kinds of the not fun situations start to brew about. So
for sure,
as long as you're changing your lifestyle, high five and say, look, we need to do things differently.
Absolutely.
But if you're not, using it as an ATM to get yourself out of the hole, be very, very, very careful.
Well, I think this is where the opportunity is, right? So, now that we've kind of gone through and talked about why are these tiers of the marketplace potentially happening?
Yeah.
And what we see there. And I think it's important for us to know that is this information, why is it important to know this? Well, one, this gives you something to talk about. It gives you an idea of what might be going on. So when these conversations come up on an individual level, you might be more comfortable having them with people. And the other side is, okay, well, what does this mean in terms of our business? What's going to happen to transaction volume? It's if your demographic of your database is this move up buyer, it's like I think about if I was selling real estate right now, that's my world right now, parents with kids and potentially moving up, but pretty much they're probably okay in the house they have it doesn't mean that marketplace goes away.
Nope.
But what it does mean is that your quantity of conversations probably needs to increase, right? You probably need to have a little bit more flow going on so that you can find those greater opportunities because people are still buying and selling those homes. Don't get me wrong. Consumer sentiment on the now is a good time to sell is at 67% on that same survey, by the way. So a lot of people are like, hey, let's sell houses right now. And people are still buying them. Like we said, all you need is about 4 or 5% of the Americans to want to buy a house, and you're going to be good. So more conversations are going to lead to more opportunities for you to find the right people, the right buyers, the right sellers. It also can get you into the position of having some tougher conversations. And I think this is where we are an amazing industry, Garrett. Being in the real estate industry, being ninjas in the real estate industry is a blessing because you get to learn a whole lot. It's also kind of a curse because you get to learn a whole lot.
Yeah.
And raise your hand if you've ever felt like you're playing therapist as a realtor and everybody is sitting there with your hands raised. Unless you're driving a car, remember, come on, 9 and 3, keep it right
Keep
there.
your hands 10 and 2, 10 and 2.
Well, 9 and 3, man. We got to go. If we're, I mean,
it is 9 and 3. I apologize. Somebody who drives
best way. 10 and 2 is what they teach you in driver's ed, which I don't know why, because like if you really want to control a car, 9 and 3, go to a racing school and you'll learn why that is. But we have this opportunity to have these conversations. And I would even say, if you want to be fueled with some value that you can maybe share, is seek out financial experts, right? Seek out financial advisors, financial coaches who understand this stuff way better than you do, way better than I do, because they're going to be able to say, hey, here's what we see going on. And here's how we talk to people about this to help them get on the right track. Because imagine you have this move up buyer who is in this position of high debt and all this stuff. Well, can they, if they're inspired to, get on a path so that within the next year, even if interest rates stay the same or go up and prices go up, they'll be in a better position to buy because they've taken care of the debt side of their income to debt ratio. And now they have more buying power than they had today a year from now. That would be incredible.
Well, and looking at it from the seller side, like I look at this as like, instead of sitting around going, I don't know why it's not selling. I don't know why we're not, that doesn't make any sense. If you go look at the data and you go look at who the buyers are that are buying these homes, and you can sit down with your seller and say, look, before we put your home on the market, I need you to know what's happening in the buyer pool that qualifies for your house.
Yeah.
And these are some things that are happening out here right now that you got to know about as we position this thing and we put it on the marketplace. And I just don't want you to be caught off guard by it. I don't want to have to come by later and go, oh, this is why it's not selling, or this is why we missed it. Like, or just come to them and say, well, I don't understand. I don't know why. Like, you should be able to sit down. This is your job as an expert, is to understand, go deeper than just, I help people see homes. I write contracts. If I find a buyer, I write it up, make sure that they can buy the house. I help people through inspections. I help negotiate. Part of your job also is to help to interpret the marketplace, to help your people navigate to a safe sale and purchase of a home, and to get them to where they want to go in hopefully the fastest, most safe journey they can possibly go on. You can only do that with the data. If I was sending you out on a sailboat and I was an expert in how the ocean works and what goes on with currents and where storms are, I'm going to prepare you differently for your trip up the coast to Seattle from San Francisco than I will to your trip to Hawaii, if we want to go down south and go around the tip of South America. All of these journeys we need to be prepared for differently. And each one of those different journeys is these tiers in this marketplace right now. There's the safe, simple journey. It's like, hey, this marketplace is pretty calm right now. The weather's pretty stable. The seas are calm. We're going to be good. But if we're going on one of these journeys where consumer debt's all over the place, the consumers that will be buying your property it's kind of rough out there right now. We need to prepare differently for this journey we're about to go on. And I'm here to educate you. And this is why we got to know this stuff and we got to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
All the data is there. You just got to go ask questions and you got to go look.
It just allows you then to be a much better advisor, which is going to help your clients make better decisions, which means your business is going to thrive. I mean, we say this, gosh, we've been in a confusing quote market now for years. So it's like just becoming the norm of like understanding that in confusing times, people move towards value. People look for an expert, and the opportunity to share education, right, and knowledge is at an all-time high because people are confused. Like going back to that Yahoo Finance headline, that's confusing. A regular consumer out there is going to go, gosh, it must be a horrible time to buy a house right now. And it's like, is it really? I don't think so personally, but according to that article headline, it seems like it is. But when you dig into the data, it's like, this doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. And again, go do your own research. I know there's a lot of people listening to this. I've had lots of conversations where people are like, oh no, inventory is not coming up in my marketplace right now. Or, they look at the stamp of just how many homes were on the market last month compared to how many were on this month. And you got to compare all this together with the activity, with the movement, and then you got to do it month to month to month. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't do is they grab little snapshots of the market. And I don't want a snapshot. Little snapshots do me nothing. That's just like, let's talk about it right now, what this means. But what does it mean? Because I don't know if that's up, or if it's down. How does it change? I want to see the change. I want to start to see the pattern of what happened 4 months ago, what happened the month after that, then the month after that, and what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And if I can see that trend line start to develop, that is powerful information. I can sit down with my client, because that I can put in their hands, Matt, and I can say nothing. I can say, based off what I'm showing you here right now, what do you think the number is going to look like next month? And when they go, I think there's going to be more inventory next month based on what you showed me. Done. We don't need to sit there and try to sell them on it. It's easy to understand. It's easy to digest. When you show something like consumer debt right now, and again, go to Lending Tree and type in, I'm just looking at 2024 credit card debt. Go show them that. And I mean, obviously for the right point, and say you can easily show something like that and say, next month, next quarter, do you think it's going to be higher, or do you think it's going to be lower? You can look at that and go like, well, based on the trajectory of that line, it's probably going to be higher. Like this is not like starting to soften out here a little bit. That's the data. That's the knowledge that you want to have so you can be the expert, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, I just want to mention this one data point here too, because I think when you look at data, because you mentioned like you want to see these trends and you want to really look at the timeline, because you might have a feeling of a market. And the truth is data can be one way, and it can be changing and changing and changing and not having an impact on the feeling of the market because of supply and demand. And one of these things that I look at, the chief operating officer of Carolina One, where my brokerage license is held, sends out these market updates every month. And he always includes this chart of where the current inventory is and where the actual listing inventory is and where it needs to be in order to have a quote balanced market. And it's crazy to see these big gaps, right? And then these small gaps and these big gaps. But I have never seen one where it's reversed, where there's more inventory than what's needed for a balanced market. And the thing is the price pressure is always going to be up until those things reverse. But sometimes the feeling of the market, the days on market, and all that kind of stuff can change as that compresses a little bit, depending on what type of inventory is available. And so when you look at something like that, it's like, oh, great. Like, what's the trend? Are we getting down to where we're going to get closer to maybe that switches? And it's fun to watch the chart because sometimes it gets close and then just widens again.
I've already watched it start to switch. I have markets right now that are telling me that they went from 4 months of inventory, and it's months of inventory is what it is. So 4 months of inventory to 6 months of inventory. The ones that were at 6 went up to 8. I just had one run for, where was it? Beverly Hills hit 10 months of inventory.
Well, but for the markets that haven't switched yet, watching that compression, I think this is the reason why you want to see the history, like you were saying, is because you won't feel it until it really switches, right?
Yep. Really switches.
But you can see it so that you can position effectively, so that you can sell properties and you can buy properties at an advantage as well.
If you go back and you listen to Larry Kendall talk about the lily pads in the pond, the lily pads in the pond is a story about every day the lily pads double in the pond. And when you look at the pond, you can walk by it. And on day 1, there's 1 lily pad on the pond. On day 2, there's 2. They double every single day. The story goes is on day 30 of the month, this pond is completely covered in lily pads. And if they're doubling every day, that means on the 29th day, the pond is half full. That means on the 28th day, the pond is a quarter full. This is how it fills up if you were to look at it this way. Well, the goal is for all of you out there to be experts in this industry is you need to see the change on the 15th day. That is how you become a true advisor to your people, is you see the change early enough that you can advise people to make smart decisions. Most people see the change on the 28th day. And this is the opportunity that sits in front of you all right now by being experts in this, is that you get to help your people make smart decisions. You get to be the one that walks by the pond and goes, this thing's going to be full in literally 3 days here. This thing's going to fill all the way up with lily pads. I can see it. I've been watching. I see the trend. I know what I'm looking for. For the average person, actually, you're going to see it on the 15th day, not the 28th day. The average person is going to see it on the 28th day and go like, oh my gosh, this thing's getting really full. This is the opportunity that's here. And yeah, one of my favorite pieces of Ninja that I've taught and worked with over the years is the lily pads in the pond.
Yeah.
And I think that super powerful. Look at this marketplace right now and changes like this as the lily pads in the pond.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, perfect way to showcase it. So you guys armed with that knowledge is going to help you execute your business at a higher level, which is amazing. So, well, Garrett, great topic today, man. This was awesome. I think people got a lot of great nuggets out of this one. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the podcast. As always, we appreciate you guys for joining us. Again, if you want to learn more about Ninja and trainings that are available and coaching that's available to you, you can head over to ninjaselling.com. And we got nice little buttons at the top that you can click to learn more about things. And you can always join our incredible community over on Facebook. Just search for the Ninja Selling Podcast and join thousands and thousands of people who collaborate and like to chat about what they've heard on the podcast, which is great. And thank you guys so much for participating. Garrett, thank you, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Till next time. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like more, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com.
There you will also find links for more information about ninja selling and coaching. Have an incredible day.